Um, all right. So it says we're live, so I'm just going to trust that.
Here we are.
Hey. Well, this is Scare-a-Thon 2022, week number 3. And we are talking about, and I love saying this, it is Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula.
How many owners of this property do we have?
Way too many cooks in the kitchen, I can tell you that much. So we're going to get into all of our thoughts on this film, which turns 30 years old this year, which is amazing because we're reaching that point with these big anniversaries where I can remember being more than sentient going to see these things in the theater. Right. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm 45. I saw this when I was 15. I have vivid memories of it. Oh my God, how did I get to this point? But now I want to introduce my lovely panel. We've got Aaron Christensen of Horror 101 with Dr. AC, as always. And for the first time joining us on Kicking the Seat in any capacity is Jeff York of The Establishing Shot, a wonderful film critic and cartoonist. If you haven't checked out his stuff, go to The Establishing Shot and check it out because you are incredible, sir.
Thank you. You're too kind, and I love it. So keep going. It's very sweet of you. It's fun to be here. I've been a big fan, and it's a privilege and an honor.
Awesome. Well, I hope you still feel that way after tonight.
That's right. After being in an hour.
Yeah.
If I'm the contrarian in the room, maybe I won't be so happy.
I don't know. We did not, folks out there who are watching, and by the way, thank you for joining. We did not discuss our thoughts on Dracula before jumping on here, so I have no idea what the landscape looks like. But before we actually talk about the film, I do want to say that this is Scare-a-Thon 2022, which means we're not just talking about movies on the live stream every Friday night in October, which we are doing. Next week is going to be the big finale where we talk about Poltergeist. We are also raising awareness and funds for a great cause. So AC, please, this is your baby. I'm just helping to birth it. Wait, I don't know how this whole thing works. Anyway,
it's alive. It's alive.
Halt your metaphor.
Yes, I'm going to halt my metaphor because I just realized what I was doing. Okay, AC, tell us about RAP.
The Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project. They provide financial assistance for women who are unable to afford safe legal abortions and emergency contraceptives. They also have an amazing network of folks that they work with so that if women need help with transportation or help with lodging or pretty much whatever they need, they are able to help provide that. And Scare-a-Thon 2022 has been a colossal success thus far. We just crossed the $5,000 mark.
Wow,
and we are reaching for 6. And the link is below. So any contribution makes a difference. I was actually having a discussion with someone today, and they're like, "Well, I don't have much to get." I'm like, $5 makes a huge difference. And like if everybody who had ever seen an email from me or a Facebook post, if everybody just gave $5. We'd be over the $10,000 mark by now. So please don't think that any amount is too small or too large for that matter. So thank you everybody so much. I mean, we've had just an amazing success, and we still have another 10 days to go. So please give and give generously. Thank you.
Bravo.
Yes. Thank you. And also, there's a link down in the description below to the Plum Fund site, which is where you are collecting the donations. So feel free to give as you are moved to do so. The other thing we do here on Scare-a-Thon is we talk about what we've seen this week in terms of horror movies. What have we been watching that's scary? So let's go around the table. And I think I'd said in the email invitation, I said, because it's going to be such a huge panel tonight, a whopping like 8 people potentially we're going to be on this thing. And we have a fantastic, tremendous 3. We can go beyond just one movie, so you don't have to pick. So Jeff, as the resident new guest, what have you watched this week that's chilled your bones?
Well, it's funny. I can actually call out 8 films, albeit short films. Well, they're short. At the Chicago Film Festival, they have the After Dark short series every year. And I just did the screener for that. In fact, it shows tonight at 10:30 at the AMC River East. So if you're so inclined as a horror fan, if you can get over there, there may still be tickets. But they were very quirky and odd this year. They're sort of not what you expected. And in fact, that's the sub name of them this year, or sub theme or whatever. A lot of satire, a lot of weirdness, but all pretty good. And there's some really good sort of horror comedy in there, which is kind of a rare thing. And for somebody to be able to do that well, it means that they not only have to know what's been done before, but avoid sort of the satire that others have already done. And they managed to do that pretty well. One of the funnier ones that is done is called Guts. So I'll just leave it at that. And it's if you're like gross and funny, it's gross and funny. But there's also a couple that I think show that a really good filmmaker is working there, and they possibly could turn them into longer features. There's one called Sucker, and I know that sounds almost like, you know, a satire under itself, but a young girl goes over to visit her friend who she hasn't heard from in a few days, and she finds that there's an unwanted guest, and it's this kind of creature that's attached to her neck and back, and it's sort of sucking the life out of her, and it's really icky but really frightening. And I thought that could be a franchise, let alone a feature. So we'll see what happens with that film, but a couple of them have, I think, potential for being more than just a short.
Quick question. Guts, is that, I think I'm getting this right, does that have any relation to the Chuck Palahniuk story? He was the author of Fight Club. I think he wrote a story called Guts about a guy who gets stuck on one of those blowers on the swimming pool.
No, I wish it was. I mean, that would have been a great story. In fact, I think they did something like that with his butt in the Final Destination.
Right. Franchise. That's what I remember. Yeah.
That was pretty funny. I mean, where he's like, help me. The girls, I like them, but they're not listening. This one is actually about a guy who's in an office setting and he wants a promotion. And he thinks that he's being held back because of his disability, which is actually that his intestines are on the outside. So he's walking around with these bloody, you know, cords of tissue, and then he gets into fights with people, and there's things spurting around. I mean, Stuart Gordon somewhere is smiling, you know, because it's very Reanimator grotesquerie, but it's hilarious. And I said it's kind of like Reanimator goes to the office.
Nice.
Got to check that out. So thanks for the recommendations. AC, how about you? I know you've been watching 1,000,000,001 things.
Yes. Well, looks like John Kitley's going to be joining us. So that's nice.
Awesome.
Let's see. I saw Anything for Jackson, which I really liked a lot. It's a Canadian film about a kindly old couple that is trying to perform a satanic ritual to bring their grandson back. It is all of those things. It's everything that you just thought right then. And then I saw The Black Phone, the Scott Derrickson film with Ethan Hawke, and I dug that quite a bit. I know it's a Joe Hill adaptation, but I thought it was one of the best Stephen King adaptations that had yet been done.
Yes.
And I was curious about that. There was something about, I was really into it until I saw the image of not Stephen Hawking, Ethan Hawke in The Mask. I'm like, I don't know. I'll watch it eventually, maybe, but it's good, huh?
I thought it was well done. Again, it feels very much like an adaptation of a book, but it feels like a very authentic adaptation. And it feels, again, it feels like, you know, the best Stephen King adaptations feel like King, but they're also films. And it feels like this manages to do that. It's like you get all the weird ghosty stuff that King is always writing, but it translates very well to the screen this time, as opposed to feeling corny. I mean, if you remember, like in Pet Sematary, the idea of or the character of Victor Pascoe.
Pascoe, yeah.
Yeah, Victor Pascoe. Like, I thought that was actually handled pretty well, like having the ghost figure follow in. And you have things like that occur throughout Black Phone. And I think Ethan Hawke is quite good as a villain. He's just an out and out villain in this one. And the mask stuff is kind of terrifying. So.
Okay. So you're saying that the thing that turned me off is actually a strength. Now I'm totally intrigued. All right.
It's all about taste. I mean, as we will, I'm sure we'll talk about tonight.
All right. And joining us late in the game, John Kitley. How you doing, sir?
Good. Sorry about that. I had to be reminded what time it was.
You mean what time the live stream was, or just what time of day it was?
Pretty much both.
Oh, okay. Wait, did you just come out from your crypt, Kitley's crypt, like the actual crypt, to do this show?
No, actually, I am in the crypt. I
was going to say the background is very horrific.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
nice.
That's
great toys.
Thank you. They're not toys; they're out of the
collectibles.
Box, so there you go. That's how you justify that.
My bad.
If the wife is around.
I'm sorry, Kitley, I think you got it wrong. If it's in the packaging, it's a collectible. If it's out of the box, it's a toy.
Okay, I got to get up in 5 hours to go to Wisconsin, so I am not going to make any sense right now or coherency. So
that's fine. I'm glad I didn't shatter your world. Like, you guys reevaluate the last 20 years. Or whatever. Okay, so
not at all.
John, what have you watched that's scary this week?
This week? Does it have to be this week?
Well, you missed the last couple of weeks.
I know.
For good reason. You're off doing awesome things. So, yeah, whatever you want to talk about.
I would say the best thing that I've seen recently in the last couple of weeks is the new Hellraiser.
Okay.
Yeah. I saw Argento's latest one, Dark Glasses, which was good, but not amazing.
I was wondering about that one.
It's worth seeing. It's better than Dracula.
Which Dracula? His
Spoiler.
Dracula?
His Dracula.
Okay.
His Dracula.
Which that turns 10 next year, so I think we're going to be talking about that in October.
Wow.
I think I'm sick that day.
That'll be that'll be the episode I do by myself.
Oh no, I'm showing up for that one.
Yeah. No, I'll show up to actually defend it because it's not as horrible as everybody thinks it is.
It was a blonde Dracula in that one, wasn't it? It wasn't the guy from The Pianist, the Nazi from The Pianist. Wasn't he the lead?
Yep.
It was Tom Ketchman.
Yeah, right.
I'm not saying it's great, but I went into it thinking that it was god awful, and I don't think it's god awful.
All right. Well, we will discover that I can't do math, so I was going to say 365 days, but that sounds wrong. So maybe a year from tonight, we'll mark it. Cool. All right. Well, I'll keep mine short so we can actually talk about the film at hand. The one that I saw that really knocked me out was called Tumbad. It's an Indian film from 2018 that thematically tied into another film I watched last week called Chetsamoka's Curse, which is a Dogma 95 film. But essentially, it's about this town in India called Tumbad, and it is cursed because there's the goddess of prosperity buried her offspring, her son, I guess this demon, in the bowels of the earth. The demon spews forth great riches to anyone who can find them, and it corrupts the town, so it's raining all the time, and there are people who are attracted to these unlimited riches. And what happens when someone leaves that town and is drawn back to continue taking advantage of this wealth, and what does it do to them and their family? It's not I hate to say it's a horror movie that's not scary, but it's got tremendous ideas. And much like Stephen King's novel, The Shining, it's more about like obsession and, addiction in the sense that not like substance abuse, but greed and what that can do to generations. So it was really great. You can find it on Amazon Prime right now. So you can watch it for free. Cool. Yeah. Tumbad.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. So before we get started, I think I've said that like 3 times, but I do want to just pull over for some comments because we have comments. We have people watching live right now. Let's see. So we've got Cineram saying, hello, gentlemen. Hello, Cineram.
Are there gentlemen here? Fantastic.
Yes. He also says, I don't make a habit of watching or rewatching creepy cinema during October. Well, when do you? No, but I do enjoy seeing other YouTube people react to some of the best ones for the first time. Well, cool. That's what we're here to do. And then also, Buffer says, hey, guys. Hey, Buffer.
Hey, Buffer.
Welcome. And I'm excited to talk about Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula because, AC, I think you might have ruined this movie for me.
Might I have?
Yes. I saw this film once, 30 years ago in a theater, went with my mom. I think I liked all the people who were in it. I thought, hey, this is the guy who did The Godfather, and he's doing Dracula. I love vampires. And I remember just kind of being okay with it, but also a little bit bored. Now, and as I mentioned, I don't know what anyone else thinks of this movie. I can't stand it because for the last 2 years, AC has been going on with this journey with me into Hammer films. We watched all the Draculas, all the Frankensteins last year, and this year we're watching sort of the quote unquote off-brand Hammer movies, and they're all magnificent. And that's why I can't take this movie seriously at all, because I feel like it's Joel Schumacher's version of a Hammer film. Everything is just so big and so grand and so over the top. I'm like, if you just taken the same production value and the same cast and said, we're going to remake Dracula from 1958, I think it would have been successful for me. I know it's an Oscar-winning film, and it's got a reputation, but yeah, this just didn't work for me. How alone am I on the panel tonight? Let's talk about it. All right, Kitley loves it.
Yeah. I think it's a handsome film.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it is a gorgeous film to look at, and I think it deserved its Oscars for costume design, for effects, for sound effects, I guess, and then for makeup. Greg Canham, who did our makeup for the Lost Boys from last week.
Oh, nice.
And it was nominated for art direction. I don't know what won that year, but I mean, the art direction in this is pretty incredible. So I think, again, it's a film that is really gorgeous to look at, and you can appreciate all of the in-camera stuff that Coppola is doing. I mean, it's pretty marvelous in all of those regards. I feel like it deliberately shies away from being a horror film to its detriment. I don't think it embraces. I think it wants to be a love story. It wants to be a horror film, and it kind of lands somewhere in the middle, and in a melodrama way.
Yeah.
Like everybody is, as to your point, like everybody is as grand as the scenery around it, and they like chewing on it as hard as they can.
It was a strange period for Coppola. I honestly, there so many people have said that, did he lose his shit, whatever it's his taste, integrity, or mind, or whatever, in the jungle when he made Apocalypse Now. But this movie was so big on every level, and I think everything was fighting. When you have these grand guignol sets and these really extraordinary costumes and period and all this stuff, and even intriguing things like the hat with the sunglasses that Gary Oldman wore when he's walking around Victorian England. Those are interesting and they're different and they're unusual. But then everything else is so big and broad too. Like, I'll just single out one factor. I mean, Anthony Hopkins, again, I don't know, he was so in control as Hannibal Lecter, just staring at you like that cat and barely talking above a whisper. And here he's like doing this crazy voice, and I mean, it's like Bane at the Moon shit that you'd see in a parody from Abbott and Costello. I don't know why Coppola allowed all that to go on. There's some things that are done very well, some great frights. Oldman as the old vampire, I think, is extraordinary. You wish he was that guy more, because those scenes where he's just creeping behind Keanu Reeves are kind of deliciously evil. But once they get into the love story and the chasing, it's all big, big, big. And Coppola never has really gotten back down to sort of that control. Like Godfather, if you look at the Godfather and Godfather 2, it's so controlled until it explodes with violence. And then it's controlled, and then it explodes with violence. This thing was just exploding everything,
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing that ruined this movie for me, honestly, is the old man vampire was parodied so well in The Simpsons, where it was Mr. Burns as that vampire. I couldn't not look at that, because I had forgotten just how much play they get out of that idea of, especially when he's talking to Keanu Reeves as Jonathan Harker. You see the shadows on the walls behind them, and it's the shadow is doing something sinister, creeping up. They did that in The Simpsons, and in this movie they don't do anything funny, but they do it so much that it just kind of becomes a joke. Like, I'm waiting for him to start making puppet animals on the wall or something.
No,
but it's
great comment.
Yeah, here's a question though. I feel like I should have tried to squeeze this in sometime in the week, but it just didn't happen. Has anyone here read the novel Bram Stoker's Dracula?
Yeah.
Okay. All of you. Okay, great.
I raised my hand and it disappeared, but I'll take it. There we go.
That was the one thing that I had a problem with, that they kept going on and on about. It's the most faithful. It's Nobody's ever done Dracula until now. Nobody's still never done Dracula because Dracula is not a love story.
No,
and there's there's allusions to Dracula being actually Vlad, but it's not. That Dan Curtis did that with the Jack Palance version, and they incorporated that whole lost love thing in there. Now, that's fine. I don't think it affected the movie. I just got irritated with Jim Hart, the screenwriter, doing that in every press junket, going, "Oh, this is the definitive version," and it's not. But that being said, other than a couple of cast members that I don't think could get a British accent to save their life, I love Anthony Hopkins. I do agree that he was way over the top. But to Aaron's point, the way it looks, the way it sounds, the way it feels, and Gary Oldman's performance, it just sells it to me. It's wouldn't consider it a perfect film because, like I said, there are things I have problems with, but I think it's just amazing. I love it. Hasn't lost its charm on me.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way because I was in this weird position watching it last night. Like, yeah, I love the atmosphere. I love the way it looks, and I appreciate the cast. But I feel like this is the kind of movie where, I would miss out on the score and the sound, but I would be much better off muting this, watching the subtitles, and just experiencing it almost as a silent film. Because, yeah, like Keanu Reeves, there is almost a de-evolution in his accent. Because when he's talking as Jonathan Harker, particularly in the beginning of the film, he's just, very kind of understated. And he's like, yes, I'll go over to Transylvania and work on this deal. And yes, sir. But by the end, when he's like yelling and screaming and stuff, it's just like all over the place. And I can't. And the same thing with Anthony Hopkins. Again, Peter Cushing owns Abraham Van Helsing. And that it's a fun portrayal, but it's also serious. He's not winking at the camera or, doing like broad comedy, but it's still fun to watch him, be this character. When I see Anthony Hopkins doing jokes or bits, like there's the bit where Lucy, she's died and she's going to become, she's going to rise from the grave. And so Van Helsing's talking to, I think it's the doctor played by Richard E. Grant, saying, yes, we need to exhume her body. And he's like, what do you, okay. He's like, I need an axe or something. It's like,
knives. He needs the surgical knives.
He needs surgical knives. He's like, oh, what are you going to do? Oh, I'm just going to cut off her head and remove her heart. I'm like, yeah, I think I laughed when I was 15, but last night I was just like, I think I literally groaned. No one was around. It just, was an involuntary reflex.
I mean, I don't know if that holds a candle to him humping Bill Campbell's leg. I'm just like, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Talk about book accurate. Was there a crazy Texan in the original? There was.
Yeah, there is. That's why they think they, were so accurate as they got that.
Congratulations.
Kind of character. It's like, very good. You got that right. Most of the other stuff.
But and that is how they kill Dracula too, with his knife. That is in the book
with the Bowie knife. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That climactic scene, I think, is something that I actually appreciated because it was a surprise. Usually it's the whole wooden stake thing. They kind of play around with the rules here a bit. But I like the fact that he went out, died kind of heroically and tragically. I thought he was the goofiest character, and yet I was the most affected by his passing.
Oh, Bill Campbell's character?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that again, kind of going against the idea that this is an accurate, an authentic adaptation, like the whole thing with Winona Ryder, like holding them off with the gun and, backing into the temple together. I'm like, let me flip through my no, that's not in there. Okay.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's funny. And this is a great panel, and you guys are not only experts in film, but horror as well. I have found the older I get, the more I watch horror movies. I think tone becomes the big issue. Generally, the films have a certain amount of craziness, right? I mean, the plot has to, because you either have Walking Dead or a creature coming to life that was made by electricity and a mad doctor, or people sucking blood to live. But when everything around them seems as fantastical as that, I tend to feel that the filmmakers are underlining everything with a highlighter. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't good stuff in this, and John, I think there is plenty to admire and enjoy, and it's eminently watchable in so many respects. But like, I think of something like this compared to, for example, a version I prefer that's a little bit better, and maybe that's reined in because it was on TV. But in 1977, they did a Count Dracula version with Louis Jourdan, and everything was done very subtly. I mean, even Louis Jourdan's character, I mean, he's a very subtle actor. His range is A to D, but that was perfect for Dracula because he was like, you are my guest, you are not leaving, and he didn't have to say and cackle like a fiend. And even Frank Finlayson in that as Van Helsing was dealing with like, okay, we're going to have to do this, but because we're going to have to do this with a steak and garlic and 100 other weird things, he didn't try to compete with that. And I sometimes wonder if certain filmmakers, maybe Coppola, because it wasn't his real forte, is looking at this, goes like, well, it's all fantastic. It's got to be done at a certain pitch. No, it has to be done at exactly the opposite pitch. The more crazy I think it gets, I think you have to have respect, at least in the acting. Let the music and the camera angles and some of those kind of things work for you. But when you've got the actors competing with those sets and those camera angles and that thundering soundtrack, I think you're in trouble.
That version is probably the closest to the book.
Yeah.
Other than Louis Jourdan. He does not, the look of him. I agree with his performance, but he does not look at all like the Count in the novel.
Right.
And the scene where he's climbing down the castle wall, looked horrible.
Yeah, the special effects, I mean, that was back in the day, I mean, you look at Superman now and it's like, you will believe a man can fly in 5 scenes. There's 40 of them.
But I do agree that is a great adaptation and is done really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing that was so, I think we're kind of hitting on the same idea here. It's not only the sets and the grandness of everything, it's the filmmaking itself. Because the shadows was one example, the shadows on the wall. I think you do that once and you're like, oh, that's really creepy. By the 5th time, it's like, okay. But he does so much with the transitions and these weird effects. I marked one down where there was, hold on. Just give me a second. I'm going to actually go to my notes here because I want to get this right. Yeah, okay. There's a transition involving Mina's eye, which transitions into a glass. That glass is filled with booze, and then through the booze you see the absinthe label, and as the bottle fills up, the absinthe label gets distorted, so all you can see is sin. Imagine like 20 of those in one movie, and you have Dracula. It was very much was it? I think it was on a commentary. I got to get my reference in, a Friday the 13th commentary. Maybe it was on Jason Goes to Hell. It was the director of that movie was talking about how Sean Cunningham would always say to his ideas, "Oh, this is film school." And so like every time he'd see something crazy in the script, he'd yell at me, "Film school, film school." That's what I thought when I was watching a lot of this movie. Yeah, again, you get away with a few of those, but after a while, it's like you're just showing off, and everything in this movie is showing off. Again, you go back to Hammer. Yeah, it might, people might think it's dated. Honestly, I think this movie may be the reason I never gave Hammer a second look, because I was aware that it was a thing. I had heard people like mention Hammer horror, and that was like old from like the 50s and the 60s. Like, oh my God, as a 15-year-old back in 1992, I'm like, that's like putting up the cross and garlic to me. But when I saw this, I'm like, okay, so I'm just going to be watching an older version of this like weird over the top gothic nonsense. And so I'm like, no, thanks. But watching them now as an adult, I realize it's not over the top at all. It's not gothic nonsense. It's beautiful, wonderful sets, great acting, just memorable stories. And you don't get that in something that had the benefit of being 30 years on and all the money in the world.
Well, here's a question for you, because I do very much think that this film is a melodrama. It sets out to be a melodrama.
Right.
I would also argue that the Hammer films are also melodramas. We got some pretty, the characters aren't deep, like the performances are serviceable. They execute. But there's something about this that is off-putting, at least to you, and whereas the Hammer isn't. And I would say that it's a little off-putting to me as well, because I feel like Oldman, Tom Waits, like all of these actors are going up to 10 and staying there, and there isn't any modulation. Like I don't see a lot of coming back down and going back up. I see a lot of showing off in the same way that Coppola is showing off, in the way that the cinematography is showing off, in the way the makeup's showing off. And it's like, it feels very performative in the way, as opposed to the Hammer films, which felt in service of the story.
Could it be that maybe it comes down to direction, possibly, because it's ultimately Coppola's film, but could it also be that, I mean, this is 1992. The entire cast are megastars at this point.
Right.
With the exception of, Gary Oldman, I think he'd been known for some things, but he certainly was more Gary Oldman after this.
Yeah,
right.
This was his big Hollywood bow.
Right, but Keanu Reeves, Winona Ryder, I mean, Billy Campbell was the Rocketeer the summer before.
Just the year before.
Right, that's right.
Right, and so you've got all these people.
And he was great in that.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
Fun movie.
Yeah, but you've got these people saying, okay, this talent coming together with all these other mega talents. They're making Dracula with the guy who created The Godfather. So it's like a big chance to come out and like show everything. And I mean, everything I can do as an actor. Do you think that could be part of it?
Well, I mean, I think Hopkins had just won the Oscar. And I mean, let's be fair. Tony's a big ham when he wants to be. And I think he was feeling like, I can do whatever I want. And Coppola's like, do whatever you want. I hired you to do whatever you want. And so, I think he was indulging in his biggest Tony Hopkins, and Oldman, that they hired him because he's a fantastic and expressive actor. So I mean, like just those two alone, you're going to have a competing, like who can chew the most scenery.
Plus, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that the last thing is like I think the accents are distracting at best, and they completely take you out of it at worst.
I was going to say I think Hopkins wanted to have fun after doing Lecter and being so serious and an intense story where he just figured, I'm going to do this and I'm going to go over the top and I'm going to have a blast, which he obviously was. But again, like I said, I'm a huge fan of his, but even I was going, this. But on that same token, I fucking love Gary Oldman in this. Yeah. And I don't care how over the top he is. I think he really powerful performance.
Yeah.
And I'd seen this in the theater when it first came out, I think 3 times. And I watch it now, and there's, like I said, there are things I have problems with, but the rest of it, the look of it, I think is beautiful. And
I wish Oldman had been the only one to go over the top. I think that may actually be it, is that there's only room for one.
Yeah.
And it's he's got the title role, folks. Let's let him do it.
Do you think part of the problem is that, and I don't know how necessarily Coppola approaches, I think you actually are onto something, John, in that my guess is that Coppola and his crew said, hey, this is fun. This is horror. This is crazy. Let's, The Godfather, it's about America. The first line is, I believe in America. And here's the American dream and the war hero who becomes, not a senator, but a murderer, a criminal. So my guess is he probably approached this and said, let's have fun. But I also think there's, to your point about the Hammer films and going back to Lugosi and TV, and, you had other successes that you could point to, Louis Jourdan on TV, Darren McGavin in The Night Stalker. Even, Fright Night and some of those kind of things that are constantly in putting vampires in the milieu. Salem's Lot was done on TV, done very well, and they didn't show the vampire there much at all. And then when he did show up, he was a freaking fiend of incredible proportions. But up until then, you always just had James Mason saying, "Oh, I'd like to have you for dinner." He could have been Hannibal Lecter. It's like, were they the same person? But I just wonder too if there's so much. Well, we've got to do something different. They had just done the Langella romantic Dracula on Broadway in the movie, so let's make this big. Let's make this Gonzo. Let's make this crazy hell's a pop and stuff. And everybody's kind of on this roller coaster. But it just, you feel the strain of it.
Well, I think there's an aspect of Anthony Hopkins' performance that I love. But I think to what AC was saying, I think it's about contrast. Towards the end of the film, there's this whole kind of plot where it's a race between Dracula, being transported via ship, and then the good guys like following him on train, and they're trying to like head him off the pass essentially. Right. And at one point, Van Helsing is out on his own, kind of in the wilderness, and he's assaulted by the three vampire brides, and he wards them off, but they attack and devour his horse, and then he goes off and he finds where they're sleeping, and he just he chops their heads off and throws them down this chasm, and he's like, Dracula. I thought that was wonderful. Right, that was badass, and I think that would have been great if he had been this kind of bottled up, almost Cushing-esque professor figure who just lost his shit when they John Wicked his horse.
Right.
Don't touch his horse. You killed his horse. Now you're gonna pay.
Now, am I the only one who heard Drago as well? Like
a Rocky IV?
It's totally Rocky IV. He's like, Drago! And I'm like, and it even echoes like in Rocky IV. I was like, this is, oh my God. So
if Dracula had shown up later and said, I must break you, he would have been onto something.
It's so funny.
Yeah, I'm conflicted because there are elements that I liked about even the performances and ones I didn't. I think my only problem really with Gary Oldman is, and I'll put this down to the writing and the direction, because I think he performs a hell out of what he's asked to do, but there is just such this, and even as an emo teenager, I call bullshit on it. There's this whole thing of, Jonathan Harker is away in Transylvania dealing with Dracula, and eventually he kind of becomes a prisoner of the three brides of his, while Dracula steals away to London. First of all, tangent here. Jonathan Harker is writing in his journal and sending letters off to Mina back in London. At a certain point, like, how is he getting away from being like bound and fed on by these vampiresses, and he's like still going back to his journal? I'm like, forget the journal, man, just escape.
And how long are those letters taking? I mean, isn't that like months across the ocean? You're talking about traveling oceans of time. It's like that one letter's like, oh, this is 10 months old already. Well,
he did have him
way past that.
He did have him write 3 letters.
Yep.
Because he had planned that he was going to mail them. But yes, it is.
His airmail via bats, I guess. Yes.
Well, carrier bat.
Bat mail.
Oh my gosh, what the hell was my point? I lost it.
I don't know, but Monica Bellucci is one of our vampire brides, and I'd completely forgotten that. I was like, oh, look, it's you.
Yeah, she is wonderful. Damn. Okay, someone else talk about Dracula. I'm going. Oh, that brings me back to my point. Dracula, Gary Oldman, the emo teenager thing, the whole bit where he's got this relationship, with Mina, because of course, as in all of these stories, there is a woman who is been dead for hundreds of years. Spitting image of Dracula's lost love shows up in present day. He becomes obsessed. He seduces her, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. But they start carrying on this almost like affair, and towards the end of the movie, he's starting to turn her, or he wants to make her immortal so they can spend eternity together the way that they were denied at the beginning of the movie. But like, he's ripped open part of his chest and he says, drink. And then she like goes very, very suggestively. I know it's subtle, but you can pick up the metaphor, but her head goes down and you kind of out of the frame. But at a certain point he goes, no, I can't. I just can't do this to you. I can't. It's that whole like tortured artist boyfriend nonsense to have the girl go, but no, I really want to. I really want to be with you. And this
got to be her choice.
Right. He's like trying to manipulate her, but coming back around and saying, no, it's if you really want to, I mean, I'm totally against this, but you can suck my blood. I just, that, and then the way this film ends with her holding him in her arms, and he's going on to his eternal, I guess, damnation, but it looks pretty peaceful. And she's all beaten up over it. I'm having flashbacks to Bridges of Madison County, where at the end of it, I'm like, I don't care if you didn't get the love of your life. What about your husband back there?
Yeah.
It's just a weird vibe. And I kept wondering, is this how it played out in the novel?
Well, the love angle, it ends with him getting stabbed.
Right.
I mean,
That's it?
the whole thing of him crawling back into the castle and then her going in there and cutting his, no, that's all added. Yeah. There is no love story in Dracula, period.
That's the issues I have with this film mostly lie with the ponderous love story that we're forced to sit through, as opposed to the mystery of finding out what this pestilence is that is invading London and is invading the house.
That's fascinating, because I haven't read the book. I always assumed, because every adaptation of Dracula I've seen, be it TV, movies, comic books, there's always that romantic, overly sexual angle. But you're saying that that's a fabrication of the adaptations.
Well, the original Lugosi one and even the Langella one are all based on the stage play, not the novel.
Right.
So they threw in, especially the Langella one, because that was the whole angle for it. That was
the sexy romantic Dracula.
Exactly, it's a romantic angle. So the Jack Palance one with the Dan Curtis, that's the first one that threw in the lost love angle. But in the novel, no, he's a beast. He's a monster, and they don't make illusions that there's some lost love thing. He's just looking for his next victim or his next lunch.
Wow.
And
I think go ahead.
I highly recommend both you, Ian, and anybody watching that to read the novel, because I think it's an extraordinary piece of storytelling. It flashes from, it's all kind of like oral history or written history,
letters and diaries,
diary entries,
right.
Dr. Seward's notes about his patients. It's really it's an extraordinary piece of fiction, and it reads so well. I think it kind of gets lumped in as alongside Frankenstein, which I think it's a quality novel, but it doesn't read like this one reads like a page turner. Dracula moves.
It sounds very much like, because this is something that I didn't know until I actually read the book, but Stephen King's Carrie. I'd seen the film, when I was much younger, but then I was like, I'll read Carrie. It sounds fun. That's all like accounts and, like you're saying, newspaper clippings and reports from psychiatric institutes and kind of trial testimony. But it all, as you're mentioning, AC, it reads very cinematically. So I don't know if King deliberately took a page from Bram Stoker in that respect, but it sounds like they'd be good novels to read together.
It's funny. One of the things that I think happens in literature, and it happened in Bram Stoker's Dracula, and you guys just made an excellent point about it, is what is the essence of the character, the either the protagonist and the antagonist. And I think in like Dracula, because he's sort of seductive and because he's got wealth and he's this mannered, affected count, right? Who brings these people over, and I want you to handle this real estate for me and all this kind of stuff. Okay, that's the sort of surface of charm and suave, being suave and all that kind of English or, country gentleman, Transylvania, grant you, that he had to have to make that effective. But at the end of the day, he's about surviving, and pretty ruthless about it. Frankenstein is really about rejection. The creature wants to be loved and he's rejected by his father. So he spends the rest of his time trying to be welcome. And then he decides to wreak revenge on the person who rejected him. Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, he has more fun as Mr. Hyde. He's a badass and he's a murderer, but still he breaks out of Victorian England. That's what those are about. And this one, I think, wanted to be part of the Langella thing. It wanted to be over the top, like, horror was at the time with the Friday the 13th and all those successful Freddy movies that were really gross and crazy and arch and stuff like that. And, Coppola, again, I think one of the things that happened to him after Apocalypse Now is I think he has had trouble honing in on what is the story here. What is the character about? Gary Oldman is very good in it. And one of the reasons he's good in it is he's playing 6 different Draculas. If he was playing the Fiend, who I'm using this to kill you, to keep surviving, because nobody matters to me except me surviving. I think you've had a straightforward, better film. And then there's a reason to kill him because it's kill or be killed. But instead he's like, oh, join me. I've traveled oceans of time. Oh, it's a Me Too generation. You have to do it on your own will. I can't force you. I'm not going to rape you. It's like, what is the tone? What is the motivation of the character? And I think Coppola lost a lot of that here. It just becomes part love story, part over the top horror, gonzo exercise, part meditation on the period and the history. And, it was too many things, I think, fighting.
On cinematic techniques, I think it's also, like an examination of what you can do and a revisiting of old time techniques.
Right. He was very much into that at that time too, with, One from the Heart, and he wanted to do all these experiments with cinematography and music and sound and things. And some of that works here, some of it doesn't. But I mean, do we need the silent movie Nickelodeon kind of treatment of that? That's just him showing off. That doesn't have anything to do with the story. It's not keeping the story focused.
Well, and also, I mean, we're watching this. I can't remember what it was, like Cinetomata Vision or something like that. Come see this thing. But vampires, and they stay true to this. They don't show up in reflections.
Right.
Well, how do they show up on film? Is that a thing?
Yeah, that's a very good question. See, logic kind of went out the window just for some of those effects.
Well, you know why they don't show up in mirrors?
No.
The legend behind that.
No, I don't.
Mirrors are backed with silver.
That's right.
And silver's the religious aspect, because that's what Judas was paid to betray Christ, was silver. Right. So silver has a religious aspect, and mirrors are backed with silver.
My God,
smart.
I had no idea. That's great.
That's a great clip, great little bit to tell us.
Is that also from the novel, or is that from like later on?
That's just legend. That's why they could see the reflection in water or something of that type, but not in a mirror because of the seer. Now, again, that could either be legend or some scientist having a lot of free time on his hand going, that's probably it is.
No, I love
We'll
that.
get people in the church pews if we make sure that they know that
that's right.
These vampires are very afraid of the Bible.
I will say that the love angle and this was way before the Me Too movement.
Sure,
so
of course.
It's a gothic romance, and that whole scene with Gary Oldman and Winona Ryder, as far as if you get into the character, Dracula's been alive for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of like even in Kinski's Nosferatu, he's not happy with being alive. He's been around forever. If he loves Winona Ryder's character, Mina, so much, he doesn't want to curse her with the same longevity. Right. So that's why he wants to stop. And he's not going to tell her no, because he really wants to be with her. But there is that gothic, and almost like in the same with the Frank Langella. I mean, it's playing up for the romance angle, and I think it works.
I think the idea of it works. I think all of that information that you conveyed is in that one scene, which, like everything else in this movie, is this over the top, like, no, I can't, no, please stop, thing. I think if this movie had been more focused on like who Dracula is, spend more time getting inside his head, spend more time with him over time, that would have been a really interesting angle for me to pursue. Because like Jeff, what you're saying, the angle of him just as this beastly creature, as an aspect of the vampire, which I guess is more true to the novel, I think if we'd seen more of that, spent more time with him and not so much these other kind of tertiary characters he's going to run into, get to know him as this fierce killer of a man, the knight that we see in the beginning of the film who renounces God. I mean, that I think the opening scene of this movie is the strongest scene of this movie, because even though it is over the top, it is, you know, rather horrifying, because you realize this guy, he's lost what he conceives of as everything, and he is now renouncing God, and God is answering back. He stabs a stone cross, and the cross starts bleeding, and then the church starts bleeding. It's a great image, but I think if that turns him into a monster, I think we follow that and we get a better sense of the animal that he is. And then when he sees that image of Mina, that awakens something in him, because I feel like over the course of centuries, it is an overly romantic notion that he can't let go of this one true perfect love. I don't know. It just seems like, again, a very kind of teenagery aspect. Like, I'll never get over this person. Like, you've been around now for 400 years.
Get a long time.
It is. That's what I'm saying. Like, you know, you can get over
Winona
a bad
Ryder,
breakup in the
Monica
course of,
Bellucci. Monica Bellucci.
She's there. She's already dead, and she looks great.
Can we talk about Sadie Frost though? Because Sadie Frost,
I was gonna bring her up. She is the best, probably because I think she is actually English.
Yes.
She's the most convincing, most lifelike character in this entire movie, and has the best, I think, arc. Yeah.
And she's still heightened. Like, she's a vivacious character, both in life and in death. And I think her portrayals on both sides of that are just wonderful. Like, I mean, I love her as, you know, a young woman who's exploring her sexuality, and she's enjoying the attention that's being paid to her. And then she's like, holy crap, I'm playing with fire in the form of, you know, this demonic, you know, creature, and I can't say no to him. And there's something exciting about that. And then, oh no, now I'm actually dying, and this isn't so hot. And then she's dead, and like dragging like babies into her crypt with her.
Yeah, she's very good in it. You're right. And then that she's one of those things that I think, to your point, is there are some wonderful things in it. A lot of the score is great. That main dun 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 dun, that kind of music, the way that's employed here is very powerful. A lot of terrific production values. It's funny. Again, like I said earlier, I think Coppola does some things really, really well. And I think John pointed a lot of those out too. And then other things where you just wish that somebody was there saying, not everybody has to be big.
Yes. I do want to mention, I don't know if anyone else picked up on this, but the opening scene where he's, you know, going around murdering Turks, right? He's got this tremendous, like, big red armor that looks like musculature. Later on in the scene where Lucy, Sadie Frost's character, is she's going out to the garden. I think it's when, she gets assaulted on that slab by the giant, you know, wolf bat beast. Her dress is almost reminiscent of that. It's this red thing that's got like these kind of ribs to it. It looks almost like that musculature. I don't know if there's some kind of thematic element, but it reminded me of that opening. Perhaps it's because, you know, she is like this comely young woman who, you know, wants to fall in love, I guess, wants to have a relationship, and Dracula's kind of like picking up on that. So it's like a callback to like this bastardized version of love, because it's not exactly what he wants. It's not exactly what she wants, but hey, you know, the moon is full and I'm hungry. Sorry. But you're right. I mean, like that scene where she comes back and she's in the crypt, and I love that the gang is there to, like, you know, put a stake in her. But like, oh, she's coming. Let's hide. It's almost like the surprise party thing, which I think if she's a vampire, she would have, you know, sensed them down there in that crypt. But it was great that it wasn't a baby. It was almost like a toddler, like a little girl that she'd snatched from the village. And when she sees them, she just drops the kid. It's like clunk right onto the floor. And I don't know if it was Billy Campbell who picked it up or if it was Richard Grant, but someone rescued that kid and everything was fine. I just think it was great. Last week we were talking about Bruce Campbell, and this week we're talking about Billy Campbell. I don't think any relationship. I just love the Campbell boys. I no transition there. Yeah.
Yep. You just left that one there. We're just going to all leave it there as well.
Yeah. Actually, I can tell you a pretty good anecdote if you want to hear it. I went to school with Billy Campbell.
What?
Yes, and Ian, you will love this because it was the American Academy of Art.
I didn't know he went there.
Yeah, he went there for a year, and he was on my dorm floor. We both stayed at the Herman Crown Center, and I was his RA for a year. And we were in art school together, and we became friends. And then he basically met Virginia Madsen and followed her to Hollywood, and kind of followed through with his acting, from his high school and I think college years, and became an actor. But I knew him, and he was a really good artist, and he's nice, sweet guy. And we were good friends for about a year, and then he sort of followed Love out to LA. And
I would have followed her to Hollywood or
she was
Arizona
the big thing.
or anywhere. I would have.
Yeah, she was she was a big actress in Chicago, and then she was kind of called to LA because she got that. I think it was Electric Dreams was the name of the first big splash she did.
Dreams.
Yeah, and then she was in Dune and a whole bunch of other high-profile things for a while.
And 1992, she was in Candyman. So same
that's
year.
Right. That's right. Candyman. She was in a classic horror movie, right? But anyway, so I knew Bill back then, and we still correspond occasionally on email. But I think he's over in, I want to say Norway now, maybe.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he's kind of retired from acting and has a family and is just kind of living the good early retirement out there. But he was, he was kind of a big thing to get this because, he was tall and kind of written like the character was. But, I asked him about it. I said, you didn't have many lines in that movie. He goes, they cut a lot.
Oh, they did.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Was it because of the Texas accent?
I'll bet it was because they probably had too many people and too many scenes, and they didn't have enough time for. I mean, at one point they're going in. You've got Richard E. Grant, Cary Elwes, and Billy, and then Dr. Van Helsing. It's like, how many people can you crowd around a casket? Again, that's some of those kind of choices. A little less would have been more there as well, right?
Well, yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the casket because there are so many like trailer shots in this movie, like beautifully done. But like, there's the bit where Cary Elwes drives the stake into Lucy's heart. I mean, that was in the trailer, right? And it works so well, even though I've seen it probably dozens of times. Just thinking about that moment from the commercial, it was still effective. Maybe it's just because I have a thing about like stakes going through hearts. It's just it creeps me out. It's like the anti-ASMR. I don't know what that would be, but yeah. So anyway, any final thoughts on Dracula?
This is the third time I've seen it, and I think I'm good.
Kitley, your love for this movie is still strong, I imagine.
It is.
Okay, good.
I could watch this once a year, and I don't even know how many times I've seen it. I've seen it, like I said, a few times in the theater when the Laserdisc came out. Watched that several times. Enough that when I'm watching it now, I can remember where the Laserdisc breaks are, the side breaks.
That's hilarious.
But and again, and it's funny too because there are problems with this film with some of the actors, but I still it's kind of like you get caught up in it. You just it's even if you, like you were saying, Ian, if you had the sound down, which would be a shame because the soundtrack is amazing. Yeah, just the visuals on the camera techniques that he did and all of that stuff. Some of the shots are in reverse. Like when Lucy's getting out of the coffin or getting back in the coffin. It's just, there's so many cool things in this. I love it. I really do.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that, you've been a great sport about this. I know we've been kind of talking a lot of nonsense about a movie that you really hold dear.
No, that's, and again, I couldn't argue that, Keanu Reeves is not terrible or that it's the definitive version, or I agree with a lot of the comments. I just still, that doesn't hold me or stop me from enjoying it. That's all.
It's the same with me and 1986's Transformers the movie. So, kindred spirits over here.
All right, I gotta go.
Hey, just hold on. We are winding down, sir. All right. All right. I just want to go through some comments because we got a few things, and let's see. All right. So going back a bit, Cineram says things I like about this movie: the score, the styles, the surreal moments, and Sadie Frost. Awesome.
All S's, by the way.
Yeah. Ooh, very alliterative. David Wilt says this movie pays homage to the classic vampire film Nosferatu, especially with the scene of Dracula's shadow moving about on the wall. Yes. And if for anyone who hasn't seen Nosferatu, see it, especially is it this year that it turned 100, or was that last year? This year, because I know there's places like art houses around the country, they're showing it like on the big screen a lot of times with like orchestral accompaniment. If you can watch it in a theater, especially an old time movie house, definitely check it out. It's great.
It also pays homage to the 79 version of Nosferatu. There's a couple of scenes, a couple of shots that are stolen directly from Herzog's film.
Wow. Oh, one thing I wanted to remember, Winona Ryder plays the lead in this movie. A bit of trivia, I had heard she was supposed to play the lead in Godfather 3, but then Sofia Coppola stepped in.
Well, Winona Ryder stepped out, and
and
he brought Sophia in because he was like, time is short, and I think she can do it.
And he was wrong. But so I count my lucky stars that this was not Sofia Coppola trying to do a British accent playing Mina Marie. Anyway,
could have been Asia Argento. So
why you gotta do this to me? Anyway, Cineram also says things I don't like about this movie: Keanu, Winona, Carrie Elways.
At least Carrie can do a British accent.
That's right.
He can, as the dread Pirate Roberts. Favorite Gary Oldman moment: his laughter when his brides attack Jonathan. Yep, very cool. Don't try to tell me that Hopkins didn't have fun playing Lecter. He may not have been OTP in that film the way he was in Dracula, but I get a real sense of pleasure in his silence performance. Agreed. Yeah.
I meant the context of the film is not fun.
Right. Although I always love that bit at the end. It's kind of like something you'd expect to see in this Dracula, but at the end where he's like, I'm having a friend for dinner, and he's got the white hat and he just walks up the street.
John walks away.
Yes. But we are going to
and the end the movie on him, not on Clarice.
Right.
That's true. So we are going to end this live stream on all of us. So thank you everyone for joining, for hanging out with us on a Friday night to talk about Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. What did you think? If you want to leave your comments down below, even after the stream's over, we'll look at them and maybe talk about them next week. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Are you mixed in between? Why did you love it? Why did you hate it? Why are you mixed on it? We'd like to hear it all. Once again, we are doing Scare-a-Thon shows every Friday night at 7:30 p.m. Central Time, talking about horror movies to benefit the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project, which you can find more information about down below and a link to donate. We appreciate everything that you're doing to contribute. Give what you can, as little or as much, as AC likes to say. Thank you to my esteemed panel. I am Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. We have John Kitley of Kitley's Crypt. We have Aaron Christensen of Horror 101 with Dr. AC, and of course Jeff York making his Kicking the Seat debut with us tonight from The Establishing Shot and the American Academy of Art, fellow alum. I wish we had a sports team. We could say, go ink pens or something like that. But
go life drawers.
There you go. Although then I think life drawers, like a chest of drawers.
Yeah, no, it doesn't really work, does it? We'd have to come up with something better.
Well, especially because in life drawing, we did see a lot of chests. I don't know. I don't think that works. It's like a double, triple entendre. Well, it's true because we drew a lot of furniture. Huh?
A double entendre.
Double D. What? Anyway, okay, gang, we're gonna go. Please join us back here next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Not talking about bats though. Talking about Toby Hooper's Poltergeist, directed by Steven Spielberg. No,
wow.
I kid.
No, he's not going to show up. Well done.
well, no. Anyhow, we're going to be talking about Poltergeist to close out this fantastic Scare-a-Thon season. I appreciate everybody tuning in and hanging out. Please check out the works of all of my fellow guests. They'll be in the description down below. If you like this show, please feel free to like and subscribe. And until next week, that'll be Friday. I was going to say whenever that is, whatever that is, but I know exactly when and what that will be. Join us for the finale of Scare-a-Thon. Thanks, good night, and stay spooky.